In an attempt to bring back some of their lost viewership, Disney is reintroducing the Marvel television banner to tell fans that they can jump in anywhere. Stick around to find out what this means for the rest of the MCU. I'm Brendan Sem for the New Wave Nerds. Like and subscribe below for more nerd content and commentary. Now let's read the news. From IGN, Disney bringing back Marvel television banner to tell fans they can, quote, jump in anywhere. They're interconnected, but they're not, end quote. Speaking to Comic Book, Marvel Studios head of TV, streaming, and animation, Brad Winderbaum, said Avengers Endgame maybe caused fans to feel obligated to watch everything in order to keep up with the MCU's interwoven storylines. Marvel Television, a banner previously used for separate productions like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and what were once Netflix shows like Daredevil, which are now MCU canon anyway, was folded into the overall Marvel Studios brand in 2019. Winderbaum said, "We want to make sure that Marvel stays an open door for people to come in and explore. On the heels of Endgame, I think there was maybe a little bit of an obligation to watch absolutely everything in order to watch anything," end quote. Now, I gotta admit, that is true to a certain extent, and that may be a little bit prohibitive to some of the new viewers and to some of maybe the more casual fans and people who aren't crazy like myself. But also, I'm of the opinion that that's part of what made those first three phases so amazing. And that's part of, at least one of my complaints I've had with phases 4 and 5 moving forward, is that nowadays it feels very scattershot. Like there is no interconnected plan, and there isn't really anything going on. And maybe that's mostly just due to the fact that we haven't had a large ensemble movie. All of the things that we've had have all been solo stuff, and so there hasn't really been much of a chance for these themes to be explored more. But it just feels all very scattershot in a way that the first three phases didn't necessarily feel quite so much so, which is weird because they are more or less fairly individual. It's really only towards the latter part where things really start to get a little bit crazy. I suppose, I mean, that makes more sense because that's when the volume picks up. That's when more things start. That's when the chords, I suppose, start to come together, and the story really starts to reach its peak. Is towards all of phase 3 mostly is where those things really start to come around full circle, and you start to feel the effects of other things across the IPs, I suppose. And I guess a large part of that is Civil War. But ultimately, not to go down a massive rant, any more massive than it already was, I think the fact that all these stories are interwoven is part of what made the first three phases so great, and why Infinity War and Endgame were such events. While they were moments in the culture, is because they were the culmination of what was it? At that point, I think it was just a decade's worth of movies, right? It was this grand story that had finally come together. And so I understand that the desire to maybe sort of get rid of that a little bit. But I don't think that's the issue with phases 4 and 5 and 6 and moving forward. I don't think the issue is the interconnected stories. I don't think it's the fact that people don't want to see those. I think the issue and the reason that people haven't wanted to invest the time to learn these and understand and see all the connections, all the potential connections, and really be interested in these phases is because the drop in quality has been drastic, right? I think you can still, like, the output of the first three phases is still pretty high looking back. I mean, that's quite a few films we get in just a decade, right? I mean, it's not as crazy over the top as we see now, but it's pretty high, and we get these interwoven stories, most of which are fairly high quality. Obviously, there's some that I would complain about. The first two Thor movies spring to mind immediately. Guardians 2 I hammer on quite a bit. But even so, like, the overall quality of the first three phases is drastically higher than the overall quality of phases 4 and 5. And so I think if the quality of these films I don't think the fact that there's an overly interconnected story is the problem. I don't think that's the limiting factor here when it comes to people returning to Marvel Studios and returning their eyes to this IP. I don't think the issue is the interconnected story. I think it's the quality of the product of the brand as a whole lately, which hopefully, we're going to address in the future here, but who's to say? So let's get back to this article here. Winderbaum said that comics are designed to be entered from anywhere and explored at the reader's discretion, and Marvel wants the same to apply to its film and TV show franchise. He says, part of the rebranding of Marvel Studios, Marvel Television, Marvel Animation, even Marvel Spotlight, is to, I think, try to tell the audience you can jump in anywhere. They're interconnected, but they're not. You don't have to watch A to enjoy B. You can follow your bliss. Ugh, I hate that line. You can follow your own preferences and find the thing you want within the tapestry of Marvel, end quote. Now, I don't understand really how you can truly, honestly do that. Have a story where you don't really have to watch A to, I guess to enjoy is different. I don't really understand. So I hope what this really means is just that we're going back to the, why does this say that there? I hope this means that we're going back to sort of more of what we saw in the, the original first three phases. I hope, I really hope, and I hope that the quality of these is ultimately going to be increasing more. But the thing is, I don't know how you can tell some of these stories that they're building up. I don't know really how you can establish these grand stories without having them, directly lead from other films, whether that be previous material in like the same series or if it's like a completely different property, right? Like let's just talk about Doctor Strange, for example, because that's the most obvious. If you don't watch WandaVision, there's no way in a million years that you're going to understand really what's going on in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. I mean, you'll get the gist of it through the actual movie, but you're not really going to understand what's going on because the film itself offers no explanation. WandaVision is supposed to be the explanation. And so I hope, I don't know. And granted, there are ways to do it where it's not quite so direct like that, but I don't know how you can tell these stories that we're hoping for, that, right? Like that we want. 'Cause that's the thing, is that you don't want necessarily only self-contained stories, because then it's like, well, what's the point of the franchise? It gets to a point when you're watching these solo movies where you're like, how did nobody else get involved here? Why is it only Iron Man fighting this thing? Why is nobody helping out? I don't know. Take your pick. Why is nobody getting involved here? It's the question of the Eternals, right? Why are they not fighting Thanos? Obviously, in that movie they explain it, but the point of the question, I guess, is my point in bringing it up here. It gets to a certain point. If you only have standalone stories, it's like, is there even? You feel there's a disconnect within the universe, which sort of somewhat breaks your immersion. At least it sometimes breaks my immersion when I'm watching these solo films, or even when I'm watching an ensemble film. I've brought this up in relation to all of the Avengers films, is that we don't really ever see them really act as friends. We don't see the real relationship. We get one scene in Avengers Age of Ultron where we get to see them be homies outside of the costume. It's after the party when they're all, arguing over who's worthy enough to pick up Thor's hammer. That's the only time that we see them really interact in any friendly way. And one of my complaints is that because we only see that once, when we get to Avengers Endgame and we have this, interaction between Tony and Cap, and Tony's like, you said we'd lose together and you weren't there or whatever. I don't remember what the actual line is, but it's shortly after he returns from space and is saved by Captain Marvel. There's, that scene, it could have felt much more emotionally jarring, I guess maybe is the proper word here, if we'd seen a little bit more of the crew being friends. I mean, obviously we get back and forth quips that shows that they're friendly with each other, but we don't often see them actually spend time together. And I think if you only have standalone stories, that just broadens that gap a little bit more, and it makes it a little bit harder to believe that these are all friends. These are all people. This is a family, a chosen family, right? But that's just me. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I don't think literally every single thing needs to be interconnected and to pull on these threads. I mean, I'm all right with standalone stories. I think sometimes going a standalone route is the absolute way to go, right? There are times when you need to separate a character away from everybody else and really localize something so that you can dive in and explore, this one incident or whatever. I'm not saying everything needs to be interconnected, but I do think that just going to standalone stuff, it sort of builds a level of discontinuity in the franchise, especially when the idea is that these people are allies who have spent a lot of time together, who've gone through it all together, especially when we've presumably, actually now, I mean, this is going to be very weird. I was going to make a different point, but I'm going to have to hold my tongue on that until we see something else coming soon, not recently, coming soon. But why don't we just get back into this article here? So Agatha All Along will be the first show under the revisited Marvel Television banner when it premieres September 18th. Agatha All Along, I believe originally this was Agatha House of Harkness or something like that. I gotta admit, I haven't followed this. I'm not interested in this series at all. I'm not even kind of. But Daredevil Born Again and Ironheart will follow suit. Agatha All Along is a spin-off to WandaVision, a series which pulls from plotlines in Avengers Endgame, Infinity War, and Avengers Age of Ultron, Infinity War, and Endgame alongside other Marvel films, and continues into the likes of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness and the Marvels. That's right, I forgot the Marvels because we have Miss Rambeau, Photon. I can never remember which is which. I think the daughter is Monica and the mother is Maria, but I can never remember. Their names both start with M, and so I always forget. Daredevil Born Again, meanwhile, is a continuation of the 161 hours of shows developed for Netflix, with the characters since appearing in Spider-Man No Way Home, She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, and Echo. Ironheart has the least amount of background viewing by a long shot, having so far only appeared in Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Yes. So here's the thing, is that continuing on my point of how I think there definitely needs to be some interconnected nature to this, Daredevil Born Again is, I think, hopefully going to be an example of something that I think needs to be interconnected. Presumably, this is going to follow whatever happens with Kingpin and Echo. This is a continuation of the Netflix series. We've got the whole original crew coming back. Charlie Cox, as Matt Murdock, has been making appearances, like the article says, in No Way Home, in She-Hulk, in Echo, and building this character up. And as I've mentioned before, I hope Spider-Man makes a cameo appearance in that. I just think building these interconnected stories and weaving these things and sprinkling little inklings of things throughout other shows is the way that you can hopefully have a product that feels satisfying, like it's a culmination of something, like it actually it's actually the result of work. So there's a payoff that it feels like. It feels like these stories, so it feels like the story itself has been led into, like it just doesn't just appear out of nowhere, like manna from the heavens, right? I think there's certainly an aspect of that. Like I said, I don't think it needs to be everywhere, but I think you need to keep it in mind, at least in my opinion, especially when that's how you've built up this thing in the first place. I think if you go too far away from that, you sort of lose what made the MCU magical in the first place, if I can even deign to use that word. Let's get back to the article. So this Marvel Television announcement has already caused a bit of confusion among the fan base, however, as Disney released Echo under the Marvel Spotlight banner to indicate the same thing. Winderbaum himself said, quote, "Our audience doesn't need to have seen other Marvel series to understand what's happening in Echo. And any show created with the same idea would similarly receive the Marvel Spotlight banner." That is one thing that has confused me. I don't know what that means for like the Spotlight banner moving forward. Is the Spotlight banner going to sort of become like an Elseworlds type of thing? Not truly Elseworlds in the sense that it's takes place in a different part of the multiverse, but Elseworlds in the sense that it doesn't have any effect whatsoever on the canon moving forward. I'm interested. I don't know how they're going to fix this. But yes, it is certainly confusing. I don't know what it means, and it seems like they really don't know what it means either. Otherwise, they would have they wouldn't be scrambling. They wouldn't have made the exact same announcement twice. I mean, when did Echo come out? I want to say it was, let's get to IMDb here. I want to say it was like June, maybe? June of 23? Let's see here. January. I was absolutely wrong entirely. That was this year? And it's only 5 episodes? Really? Wow, but these are not rated high at all. I didn't look at the stars until just now. I mean, I know that the show didn't go over all that well, but geez, I still haven't watched it, so I guess that tells you really, really all that you need to know. I don't know why it came to that in the first place. That's right, the Marvel Spotlight banner. So if that just happened in January, that's earlier this year. I mean, I maybe the announcement was in June of 23. Maybe that's why I was thinking of it. But this is 4 months later. Like, we're barely a quarter in to the whole year, and they've already, I don't know. They're really scrambling here. I think it's really obvious that they're sort of they're very nervous about what's going on moving forward. I think they're trying to put all of their eggs into the Deadpool and Wolverine basket and hope that generates enough so that they can move forward into like Captain America and Fantastic Four, that keeps interest. But why don't we finish out this article here? Marvel has struggled to keep fans interested post-Endgame as the amount of MCU content has increased exponentially. While the original Phase 1 lasted just 12 hours and 24 minutes, for example, Phase 4 lasted 54 hours and 40 minutes, and that's before Marvel made the 160 hours of Netflix shows canon too. Disney CEO Bob Iger said the volume of shows has, quote, diluted focus and attention of fans, and in response, Marvel will release no more than 3 movies and 2 shows per year going forward. Deadpool and Wolverine is the only MCU movie for 2024. Okay, so, I mean, to be fair, I don't know if the time comparison here necessarily really is all that important. I mean, sure, I mean, the sheer amount of content, the sheer amount of properties, let's say, has vastly increased from Phase 4 to 1, but a lot of those hours are from episodes, from series. Let's be honest. So if we were to take out all of the what am I trying to say here? If we were to take away all of the, if we were just to, let's just say, distill the TV series down to 2 hours each instead of the culmination of however many episodes it is, I mean, the differential in time would still be drastic, but I don't know if it would be necessarily quite that insane. Now, as far as that's concerned, I mean, like I said, I don't necessarily know if the amount of content here is the sole problem. I mean, sure that hasn't exactly helped, but again, I think the main problem here is quality. And right, obviously Disney's put quantity over quality, but I still think that there's a way to balance both. Obviously, the output wouldn't be as massive as we've seen from the current phase, but it would be a happy medium point, and then hopefully at least and they would be average at best instead of mostly bad. I don't know, but I don't think the amount of time, the volume, the quantity is absolutely an indicator as to the perceived drop in quality. But I don't know. I think if Disney were to produce a phase where they everything was like an even like a 7 point, like the worst thing was like a 7.5 out of 10, I don't think they would have any issues moving forward if they just, I don't know. I think there's a way to balance both. Obviously decrease the quantity, drop it way back, but still have a high quality moving forward. And I hope that's what we're getting. I hope that this drop in output is going to equal an increase in quality. But to be honest with you, I'm not exactly convinced that the quality is going to increase. I'm excited for these projects moving forward, but I'm not. I'm hopeful, but I'm not. I'm cautiously optimistic, let's say. I don't have the highest of hopes, but they are there. But that's where we'll leave it today. Let me know down below. What do you think this means for Marvel Spotlight? What does this mean for Marvel Television? I don't understand. How do you think this is going to affect the MCU moving forward? Make sure that you like and subscribe for more content, and we will be back here tomorrow. Actually, no, we will not. Tomorrow, make sure to join us for the weekly fixation, and I will